But really ask yourself, like, who's in your hands? Do you have your father's hands? Do you have your mother's hands? Do you have your uncle's hands? I sit a lot with genetic memory these days. And often people talk about it as something that's this abstract thought, and I'm always like, no, just look at your hands. Look in your mirror. Look at the receding hairline a lot of us are getting and being like, oh, that's where that comes from. There's people inside of us. And there was a really powerful study done by Emory University, their neuroscience department, the other day. It was released about 1 year ago. It's starting to make the rounds. And it was actually the study they had done with mice. And it was similar to the study with Pavlov's dog, where there was stimulus, response, and see what happens. With Pavlov, it was around more pain and seeing how the dog would respond, or food and seeing how the dog would respond. With these mice, it was a little bit different. They did more along the lines of a sound, and the mice would start shaking. But they did something different this time. They tested the mice, but then they tested the children of the mice. And what they found that the children of the mice, even though they were never exposed to the stimulus that their parents were, had the same reaction as their parents. And then they noticed the children of those mice had it as well. And the children of those mice had it as well. And it was actually the fourth generation where the response was finally extinguished, meaning that when a mass trauma affects a person or a collective group of people, it stays within the genetic bloodstream for about 3 generations before it ends. And then I think about that, and I have to think not only about mass trauma, but mass beauty as well. And think about genetic memory in the positive way. And I think about that when I think about the thing that we all inherit, which is Starlight. Because I don't know if you know this, but we were born stars. Only some of us then crash. Now Ryman Bar is 16. At night, I know some grown men who go to clubs and they pick up on women who are barely 16. Too many underage men are behind bars doing bits in 16. My sister, she told me sweet 16 ain't so sweet, so she rushed to grow older a year earlier. Quinceañera, they call it, 1 to the 5, decade plus half. My grandfather lost his brother building transcontinental railroad tracks. My cousin's arms, he bears witness with the traces of tracks. This is why some of us write tracks. We see the need for alternatives. We be the new MCs, those who respect ancestors and producers. My family worked the fields. We lost 2 aunts to pesticides. They died from cancer. No answer from God. Systems, left, right, religious. Keep your definitions. My father is not a mechanic. He is not oppressed. He is my father. Sorry. I have what they tell me is called ADD. Audio deficit disorder. That was off track. Back to my original train of thought. My Tio was a Gandhi dancer, Mexican singing as he was swinging a sledgehammer and body into railroad ties. We tied our lives with those tracks. We died with those tracks. Now those tracks are where children beat each other to death in the back with railroad ties in the shy. Radio tracks loud, we lay gente. What has happened to us? It's like we like being wrapped in a clack of a backseat of a black and white back screws, blue eyes, bloodshot, red, green. Give me the money, honey. What is the color of truth? It's indigo. We have indigenous names, and indigo generations will rename, retain, reclaim reality. We are bronze skin, obsidian beautiful people, and I know it is hard out here. But our ancestors built temples that raised the sun. Don't tell me we can't raise our children. Your visions are playing hide and seek with secrets beneath ocean floor. Your tomorrow is like land underneath Los Angeles faulty. Love your people enough to carve a new philosophy. Some say that the prophecy was that those who were discovered will discover the next new world. We will build it audibly. We will name it the new word. Columbus and Captain Cook will be censored, as will all those who stole our stories. They will learn to sit in silence and listen. Just listen. And listen, just listen, for we were born stars and then crashed. This is why we do not do well with systems of oppression or gravity. We were never designed to be held down in the first place. So much of the last 10 years of my life has been sitting trying to understand the mechanics of genetic memory. Like, how does it work? How does it operate? I find for those of us who have been involved in, whether you call it movement, social good, change, organizing, activism, grassroots, we have all these words for it. And then we all form camps around what we think the appropriate word would be. Nah, you ain't down enough, son. And I find that we're really in this era, sadly, where so many of us are just operating off of buzzword camps. And genetic memory is starting to become one of those buzzword camps. And I really wanted to understand what are the mechanics of it, like how does it operate? You know, and I think those studies that are starting to come out in neuroscience, you know, are very important. I think it's also important to understand that neuroscience is finally catching up to indigenous generations' understanding of 7 generations. And I also have to hold space to say that this is not an either-or conversation. That there's some amazing things that technology is allowing us to explore that were never previously possible on the planet. And then they're just kicking themselves in the ass with the huge blind spot by discarding about 5 millennia worth of best practices of 90% of the population. You know, how can we have these conversations together? And so for those of you, wherever you are on your path, whether you consider yourself more on the womb side of the metrics of well-being or on the whole side of the metrics of well-being, I just want to offer you this thought. In the last century alone, trauma foundations have undergone 4 drastic shifts, from the physical to the psychological to the post-traumatic. The 4th is what we are witnessing now. For within Western psychology frameworks, trauma is primarily examined often through the lens of an individual. Rarely is it seen as a collective wound that dramatically reshapes the interactions of well-beings of entire peoples. It is as if we have forgotten human beings are, at our core, social creatures. How then could we ever limit our ideas of pain, much less the ways to resolve them, to the weight of one individual? Neuroscience and sacred traditions both tell us that genetics carry physiological and emotional coding that we pass on to our children. When their children move from womb to world and have children of their own, that genetic memory will not be buried but encoded. Reflect on that for a moment. When an entire society is desecrated, demonized, invaded, or imprisoned, it reshapes the cultural gene pool of that entire generation. What is trauma then but a collective and a cumulative phenomenon? Our progress in healing and preventing trauma will grow exponentially then, when we begin to see scars as collective wounds versus an individual's issues. For no matter your pain, there is at least one person walking with a parallel wound. Perhaps now you understand why on stage so many of us say these are not poems, but the story-based strategies of healing the wounds of invaded people. The truth is our generation is not sad, nor are we apathetic. We are suffering from intergenerational shell shock. May these words help you move beyond numbness. I too am learning to let go of the hate for oneself that emerges from continually being subjected to a social narrative of invisibility or demonization. We as a generation are learning certain things we were never meant to own. Shame, emerging from a wrong that was done to us, is one of them. If you are one who feels defeated, I encourage you to hold a mirror to what we victoriously survived over the last 5 centuries. As people who live in difficult times, we can never have enough reminders of human beings who embody resilience and cultivate goodness. Feelings of frustration are natural. Yet when isolated, then compounded across generations, they metastasize into an inferiority complex for an entire people. Reflect on the genetic journey of millennium that led into you. Listen to your lungs. How powerful is your breath? For even being able to hold air with the weight of empires that have attempted to impede our process of inhale, exhale, breathe. Listen to your heart. Give thanks to those who came before. Then leave behind a little more than you were given. Do not limit intelligence solely to the mind. Be a genius of heart. Your genetics already are. Playing small only benefits your enemies. Say it with me. Now is not the time to be timid. Now is not the time to be timid. Now is not the time to be timid. In the ideas of we are a collective people, I want to leave you with 2 thoughts and a story. It's all story in the end. We're vehicles and stories are engines. Not too many of us are behind the driver's wheel, sadly. But in the idea of human beings being collectives, another neuroscience study was done the other day, and it was pushing the UN to declare solitary confinement as torture by definition. Yeah. And I was talking with some colleagues at the UN, and they were telling me about the research that was going on. And it was that once you're put in a box, in a cell, and the longer that you're left there without contacts with other human beings, the more time and space begin to deteriorate. To the point where you don't even realize this is a hand anymore. You can't physically differentiate the difference between your arm and a wall. And that's normally within 1 week of being placed in solitary confinement. When that happens, the mind collapses on itself. And we crack. And I think about that. And I just think about the importance of relationship. Because if there's anything that you take from this tonight, let it be this idea that we are barely getting to the conversation of whole person, and we're not even touching on the necessity of whole people. That no human being can exist in isolation. All our strategies for social transformation often rely, as Nikki was saying, on human beings as transactional forces within what we believe should occur. As such, if they don't fit within our expedient strategy, then they're discarded. What does the theory of change where no one gets thrown under the bus look like? And I don't have an answer for that. I've been asking people across the globe. That's what all those countries' visits are for. Not just, oh, let's get another passport stamp. It's really trying to understand, where are the places on the planet where no one gets thrown under the bus? And what does that look like? How do they resolve difference? Because often we think that just means utopia. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You travel across the world, you realize we got a lot of drama going on as a species. And I'm not even talking on a structural level. You just put people together, we will invent drama. We are an inventive, creative, innovative people, and drama is part of our innovation. Resolving that drama is part of it too. You know, do not exclude any part of the spectrum of human emotions unless you want damaging things to happen. You know, it doesn't mean we have to sit there and drown in them, but it's like, understand that they're all necessary. And so, if you all have ideas on that, what does the theory of change where no one gets thrown under the bus looks like, please let me know, because I am trying to figure this out. I really feel that that's the question that our species is dealing with this specific moment in human history. Because we're at a really interesting tipping point, where either we're going to figure it out, or we don't. And we don't means that we're not going to be around here anymore, so this question's really moot, so I'm good either way. And I think about that because going back to stars are energy. And what? Energy cannot be created or destroyed. The second law of thermodynamics. If you look from a spiritual level, what does it say? The human being has always been here and always will be here. So we are good. When I look at my daughter and I think about like the cumulative transportation of genetics from one generation to another, and I look at her and I'm like, you are me. And then I look at her and I see my dad and I'm like, I am him and she is him. And I'm like, wow, like we are always going to be here until we're not. And this is that are we going to be here or are we not moment. And I'm really curious to what we answer. I have some hope in us. I really do. I really do. We live between crosses and crescent moons. Prayer rugs, cell blocks, and a ballot box. Prisoners and presidents. Hope and a hangman. Hope and a hand grenade. Hope and in a hang noose. When our children are elders, their children will call this time we live in this era of wounded dreams, when systems openly assassinated imaginations. No one tells stories anymore. It's as if we believe gravity is real and unicorns are not. We've swallowed the sugar-coated cyanide that tells us the narratives of the invaders hold more truth than the memories of my grandparents, how damaged our belief systems are. We tell ourselves existence is resistance, not life is affirmation. To fight and write back tonight, fight and dream forward. To deconstruct empire but rarely blueprint ourselves, it's as if we have forgotten a nation is nothing more than a collection of narratives. A community does not make sense of the world through statistics, but stories and bigots are painfully unimaginative. This is why they want to censor our culture. They know they cannot compete with our creativity. So this is for you who dance, write, live, love, speak, exhale, the world unknown, who place starlight in the barrels of rifles and march against darkness. Militant sunflowers, holding up your heart like a hand grenade, hope in a hurricane. Hummingbird with hope strapped to its core like it was C4. We remember the only reason we're alive is we had at least one ancestor who refused to die, who then lived long enough to have children who did the same. This is your genetic inheritance. Remember this. So dance indigo, cultivate brilliance, speak pain, name pain, grow dreams, and in times of terror, wage beauty.